Well, looks like there's a mad dash to buy automobiles before the tariffs go up. And then some are saying that's not the best idea. It's too late for me. I went and purchased a bunch of Hot Wheels for the grandkids for Christmas. Welcome to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates, coming to you live from the Northeast Georgia mountains and the tiny town of Tiger, where it's sunshiny and polleny and everything and its brother is out running around right now. And I guess that's a good thing. It looks all beautiful out there, nice and green. As I was leaving church yesterday, I closed the door on my car, and it looked like just a little twister right there. A little tornado of pollen came off. So by the time that I had gone in and the time that I left, the car was just covered. And it is going to be this way for a while. I don't really think we see much of a relief in this until probably sometime in June. So, hey, a lot of stuff in the pending pile today. I've just kind of blown away. I've got a few articles I'm going to piece together. Of course, the title of this episode is called To Read or Not to Read, and we'll get there in just a minute as we hit the headlines in the pending pile. There are a few things I just wanted to cover. This first thing about rushing to buy a car before the tariffs hit might not necessarily be a good idea. And they go on to explain that the whole purpose behind the tariffs is to actually drive car prices down, foreign cars especially, to drive those down. And they were talking about one of the reasons behind this is because American manufacturers, some of them are running terribly behind. And they were talking about American companies, or American-based companies, like Dodge, Ram, and Lincoln. These are all parts. These are all companies that are not doing real well right at this moment. And they were talking about the leading companies in America. Many of those are foreign car companies. And they go on to tell you the details of who they are in this article. But the whole purpose behind the tariffs, they were saying in this article, was to drive the prices down on foreign cars, which would allow prices to be more reasonable. And part of the reason is the whole idea of supply and demand. And if you raise the prices up based on the tariffs of the foreign cars, then what happens is people will go to a lesser price on American cars, for instance. And American cars worldwide are really at just the bottom end of the totem pole, really, when it comes down to it. Most countries don't purchase American cars. They're purchasing some sort of foreign car. And the article goes in to tell you about that. And in this article, they recommend you might not want to go rush out and try to take advantage of the quote-unquote New Deal, because as the prices initially go up, the whole idea of supply and demand is that most likely there'll be a number of foreign cars that are left at the end of the year, and they'll have to mark those down substantially, and it will bring the actual cost of that car down a good bit just to be able to compete. And it makes for good competitive business, really. So if you're rushing out to take advantage of the deals on the foreign cars, and really, I'm not so sure that the whole rush for cars right this minute is just because of the tariffs, it may be, and the sales that they put up there. But the whole reason why they put up the sales, and they do this each year, is because your tax returns have come in. And people want to go put money down on something that they're going to purchase that's going to make their life better. And most of the time, many, many times, that's a car, an automobile. So, recommendation of this article was it might not necessarily be a good time to buy a car. So, another article that I found was just fascinating to me that is interesting today is that the Treasury Secretary he says that the American spending right now does not match what the polls that we're seeing from the media are saying. And he goes on to explain the details of the reasons why. And one of the things he says is spending habits right now for the past 35 years, he says, I've been looking at analyzing data. And he said, what I'm seeing here is that Americans are actually spending money right now. They really are. They're out and they are spending money. And it's true. And so with all of this, he goes into the polls and he says the polls show that only 39% of adults in the country approve of how Trump is handling the job. And 55% disapprove. But in that, normally when you have this kind of data that comes in, people don't move around a lot and they don't spend a lot of money when that's the case. And when the president is doing a great job and people feel pretty good about the job that he's doing, they get out and they spend a lot of money. Right now, I can tell you, especially in our area and other areas as well, tourism is incredible. People are moving like crazy. It used to be here, right outside the tiny town of Tiger, that it would get busy on the weekends. Everyone heading to Cherokee, North Carolina, usually on a Friday afternoon. It used to be that was the case. You didn't want to drive on the weekends. Everybody's headed up to Cherokee, North Carolina, because that's where the big casino was. All of that was going on. So you didn't want to be out there Friday afternoons. And then on Sundays was the day of depression when everybody came back from the casinos that had lost all their money after going up there. But I'm seeing traffic move like crazy all over the place right now, even midweek. And that's not something that we're used to seeing a lot of midweek. But right now, traffic has increased a great deal because people are out and they're moving around. They're going out to eat. They're going to restaurants. I'm looking at where parking lots of restaurants are full at this point. Restaurants are expanding. New restaurants are opening. New stores and things are beginning to open. Gas stations are going up in the nation in different places, a lot more. They're building brand new places. It's really at a time at this point of expansion as far as that is concerned. And that's usually unlikely when people don't feel good about the leadership of the country. But this year it's exploded since the beginning of the year. Now, at the same time, the other thing that's happening is that companies, a lot of money is being spent by consumers that are getting out there because they are moving around. They're going places, they're touring around, and they're not staying in their homes to be shut up. They're actually traveling. We see this happening a lot. And that usually when that happens, it means people feel pretty good about the way things are going. And that's what this article gets into. But he said, of course, in this article, he talks about the headlines. And he says the feeding of the media. He said, for instance, there was this story 10 days ago that said, it's the worst April for the stock market since the Great Depression. By the way, let me also say this. I've heard this, I don't know how many times through the year. Worst place the stock market could be since the Great Depression. I've heard it many times. He said, but just 10 days later, NASDAQ is up and the market is back up and it's had its largest increase really ever in the shortest period of time. And he said, but there are no articles on that. There are no stories that says, oh, the market has recovered and come back with its biggest bounce ever. Because all we really report is negative news most of the time. And by the way, this is no exception. These are all major news outlets, yes. And I know you would think probably, well, you're going to get that from CNN or CBS or NBC or something like that, but you're getting it from Fox News as well. I mean, that's what's happening. But he begins to talk about that and sort of what's happening. And he also goes into the details on why all of this is happening. And he said that with the tariffs that are going on, he talks about the economy, all that's going on right here. And he said the whole idea of this is to create an atmosphere of strategic uncertainty worldwide. And what he means by that is this. America has been very predictable, meaning this, that if someone moved one way, America would automatically fall suit to move in that direction. Very predictable, extremely predictable in its moves, extremely predictable in its financial moves, extremely predictable in its strategic moves as far as national defense, all of these just really strategically predictable. And what's made America strategically predictable and look sort of soft and soft-hearted is the fact that at the core of that, it's sort of a masked idea of compassion. Well, let me say the reason why I say it's a masked idea of compassion is because the legislation behind it has not ever truly been about the American people, and it's not really ever been about the compassion of other countries and things like that. It's all been about money making with the people that are behind. Because what you see as legislation is passed is money pads the pockets of those who are passing the legislation, which is why this happens. That's why I say masked compassion. Because it's not normally, or not necessarily like that. Oftentimes it's there to pad the pockets of the person who's passing the legislation or the people who are doing so. Until now, we're not seeing that as much now, because now all of a sudden accountability is coming, and as accountability comes, oh my gosh, we all have to stand. And so we're watching even Democrats and some Republicans too at the same time just turn on a dime and say, wait a minute, we have to go back to this, things they were speaking out against a few years ago, and they have to do this now to have some credibility. Let me just move on forward. So when he talks about strategic uncertainty, what he means is that we're changing up the whole plan so that the world cannot predict what you're going to do next. And out of that, they stop for a minute. And the reality is when another, even when you're in, let's even say basic relationships that you're dealing, business relationships, whatever, you don't necessarily want to play all the cards at one time. So, and I have something a number of years ago I thought about and come up with, and I just wrote this out and actually posted down on a Post-it note and stuck it up, which is this. If you're going to play poker with the devil, whatever you do, don't be predictable. If you're going to play poker with the devil, whatever you do, at least don't be predictable. You're going to lose anyway, but don't be predictable. And I know all of those that are out there that say, yeah, but greater is he that is in me. Yeah, but the bottom line is you shouldn't be in the game of poker with the devil in the first place. But yet we have to. In order to do the things that we do worldwide and trade worldwide, we literally have to play poker with what you might consider the devil in a lot of ways, because those countries aren't out for your best interest. So the one move that we actually have and still can actually hold on to the compassion with is to not be predictable. So strategic uncertainty, when he speaks these words, what he means is that we're tired of playing poker with the devil, and we're tired of being predictable. So, in order to take back and have just a little bit of authority, we've got to create this idea of uncertainty, which means this, when you get down to it, the definition of this is this. We have zero idea what Trump is going to do in the next 5 minutes. And so, therefore, we have to come back, and where before these countries are willing to take a chance or willing to take a move or willing to do anything that might actually wound America in some way, form, shape, another, whether it's from national defense or whether or not it's from, trading, whatever it is. Now we have no idea. And so the idea of that is that, oh my goodness, is Trump going to go off the rails? Reagan did the same thing. They had no idea. They said, my goodness, what's he going to do? And so strategic uncertainty has always played a really nice hand for America, or for the United States. And that's what I'm saying here. And everything from, and the whole idea of all of it, the whole idea to create all of this strategic uncertainty, the whole idea of changing to the Gulf of America, the whole idea of making, the English language the primary language, the whole idea of offering to buy Greenland and offering to go down and, fix the Panama Canal situation, all of that it creates uncertainty in the world. It's like, what in the world is this guy going to do? You have no idea. What's he going to reach for next? You don't know. And so therefore, what it does is it makes your trade partners, and it makes those who are sitting back going, hey, I figure we can get this done and do this. They have no idea what to plan on for the future, and it leaves the president of the United States with the ability to play the cards carefully one by one. It actually buys a little bit of time, and it brings people to the negotiation table. That's what strategic uncertainty is all about. And it works. It's worked in history, still works today, and is working now. But now when you create that strategic uncertainty, sometimes the American people look up and go, what in the world is he doing? And so with all of that, you look at it and you say, well, wait a minute, this is a credibility gamble in some ways. Because what if it doesn't work? Well, for the most part, if it begins to not work, you can always dial back on your uncertainty. But for the right up front, someone has to just take that power or bring that power back to where you can have credibility to the table. It's kind of like this. When you go sit down and you're going to play cards at a table, will America even be considered a quality, card player, or do they have, what it takes to get to the table to actually play? And that's exactly what strategic uncertainty does. It allows you sort of a line of credit, if you want to call it that, as far as trust. And it brings you back to that playing table, and it brings you back as a lead contender worldwide. And there you go. There's part of the pending pile today. So just hold on. Again, we still don't know what we're doing because strategic uncertainty is the fuel behind the things that are being played. And it actually is wise if you have people that are stepping back. What does that mean? That means that if you have advisors that are advising you, and he does, and things that are taking place, and they're playing this with a number of people that are counseling to do these. It's great. It's great. And where it goes off the rails for strategic uncertainty is when you have a leader that is just bonkers. And I think Trump has proven that even though he talks big, he's definitely not bonkers. Anyway, there you go. The other thing, I just saw this a few minutes ago. I saw where there's a gigantic electricity blackout that hit Spain, Portugal, and France. And they have no idea the reason why. They haven't figured it out. They don't know what's going on there. But there's a huge blackout in those three countries. And they've got areas that they're showing here. Just popped up on the news a couple of hours ago. But I thought I'd mention that. It's interesting. Kind of keep an eye on that, see what's going on there later on. But what is at the core of this podcast, as we talked about all of these things today, but what's at the core of this podcast are a number of things. An article that came out that says that the mental health of children has declined drastically over the last 15 years, and technology seems to be given the blame for that. Interesting, because you get into this article and it talks about the fact that mental health has taken a drastic decline in children and teens over the last 15 years. And they go on to explain the reasons for that. And part of that is a lack of connection in the home, and they go into those details. And so I pull that article, and then there is another. That article is interesting. Then there's another article I thought was interesting. As I'm looking at it, it says, credentialed but illiterate. There's a reading crisis at the heart of education. And they go into this article, and they're talking about the fact in this, they have the credentials. They'll graduate high school with credentials, and they'll enter into college. But they're illiterate. They don't know how to read. Students do not know how to read. And it goes on into the details of why that is because reading and things like basic grammar, it's also because comprehension, all of that, has been sort of put to the back burner. And instead of comprehension, engagement, just having them actually have some input over actually being able to comprehend the things that you read. The other thing is screen fluency over print literacy is, so if you're fluent in the screen and in technology, it doesn't matter. You don't need to have have print literacy. You don't have to necessarily have all of your sentence and structure and all of that. But the problem is when you get down to this, and it's a failure, he says in this article, that what's being said here is it says that, It's not an educational system problem. It's a societal problem, and he goes into the details of why. And he talks about the fact that the basic structure of learning, it really happens when they're toddlers at this point, and there's a disconnect that's taken place there. And he goes into the details of talking about the reasons why. And he says what's happened is that technology in itself is being handed to children at a very young age, toddler age. And since that's the case, they just hand them technology and they let them just either watch videos or, get online, whatever, something that's going to just sort of capture their attention. He also talks about the fact that gaming, toddlers are introduced to gaming early so that the parents can go do what they want to. There's not really that much connection. It's interesting because you look at that, and the thing about it, as he gets down to it, he talks about why reading itself, what's happening is that there's such a fear over preserving students' self-esteem that schools are often reluctant to challenge students and hold them accountable for the things that they do not know, and or even insist upon higher standards that where they are. So it's sort of that everyone gets a trophy idea in the middle of that, and so we can't give them a lesser grade because they're at least they're putting forth some effort, that sort of thing. But what's doing is it's graduating. It's giving them credentials, but they're graduating with literally nothing behind them. And then when you get to college, that's a whole different ballgame. Because once they come in illiterate. Now, what do you do with that? Because tuition's being paid. And unfortunately, if your students come in college and they don't know how to read and they can barely do the things that are necessary to enter into college, then we have an issue. And so now tuition goes down because you can't keep your students in because you can't hold them at a higher level at this point. So tuition decreases, and the college is not going to decrease the tuition. It's multi-billions of dollars of an industry. So they just continue to pass on the kids. And so they graduate. And what ends up happening is they end up graduating. And when they do, they still graduate illiterate, not prepared for the future at all. And he goes into a ton of detail on this. And then in another article that I was looking at, it said we're actually in a serious crisis nationwide. He talked about the fact that, and here's the reason why, that 74% of students that will graduate from high school this year, 74% of students that will graduate from high school this year will not be able to qualify to get into the American military. And there are two reasons. One reason is they will not be able to meet the physical requirements to be able to get in. That's one reason. That's the top reason, actually. But there's a second reason that actually goes along with that is just as crucial and almost dead even on the second reason, which is they can't pass the general basic ASVAB test that it would be able to get into the military or hold scores high enough to pass in anything because they have no experience whatsoever. That's what the ASVAB test normally is about. What is your experience in? They have no experience. And so as a result of that, they are unable, both physically and mentally or academically, to get into even the American military in the baseline. 74% of high school students. And never in history have we been that way. So and in that article, he's talking about this actually is like a national security crisis because they simply do not qualify. Now, these are all articles that are different, but they're all coming together. Why is this? And then I found another article that was really interesting. And this is on education. And it says stories can inspire virtue in children. And it goes through. Bill Bennett is being interviewed in this article, as well as some top psychologists, throughout the nation. And they're talking about what is it? What is going? What's going on? And there's a section in here. It says the behavior of mom and dad either reinforces or takes away from moral teaching. And it goes into the details, and it talks about how this all begins. And he begins to talk about, in this article, they get down, and by the end of this article, in this discussion, it comes down to this, that if you sit and read with a toddler, it's not about necessarily the stories. Because, and they bring up, they ask the question, are Grimm's fairy tales, do they actually teach morality? And it's in a very small way, but that's not where the morality comes. The morality comes from the connection that is made between the one who is reading to the toddler and the toddler. Okay, so the toddler looks up, and as that toddler looks up, and as the Grimm's fairy tales he was talking about, he said they ask the questions about the stories that are being read to them, and it opens a line of communication. It's connection. By the way, leadership doesn't come without some connection. You have to connect. And when you sit a toddler down, you go, here is a technological device. There is no connection. And that's what's missing. It's why there's a decline in the article about mental health, because as a toddler, there was no connection. Then it goes into why are we illiterate? Because of the fact there has not been any connection. Are we finding that today? Sure. It's interesting. A few years back, I talked about this a while back. We couldn't address a letter. Couldn't address an envelope. That's like 10 years ago. Had no idea how to address an envelope or a letter. I discovered 10 years ago, many of the students that I had really did not even know their home address, did not know what that was going to be. That's about 10 years ago. But today, where are we? We're running into students today that it's interesting. I'm running into students today that no one has ever even sat with them to teach them how to tie their shoes. High school level. They have no idea how to tie a shoe at high school level. No one has sat down. No one's put their hands on the top of the hands of them as a small child and said, here's how we do this. No one. Let alone sit to them and read to them as a toddler. This article talks about how the stories that are there, it begins a connection. And it gets into this connection, and it talks about that connection that's made between both the person who is actually speaking and either telling the story or reading to the toddler, turning the pages as there is interaction between the two. The toddler can ask a question, and it develops a bond. And where the morality comes in that toddler, and the things that become important to that toddler as they begin to grow in their stages of development now. They find that toddler now is watching the person that has read to them, or watching the person that has sat and talked to them and told them stories and interacted. And as they watch that person, they develop the morals of that individual by what they've seen. So it's about the behavior of the one reading the stories. And that's what gives them credibility. And it's what brings the morals into a toddler's life. It's also where they get the security from so that their mental health is secure, they can make decisions. It's also what reduces anxiety in that child's life that they won't carry into adulthood. That connection is important at the toddler stage. And so the reality is the parents or the caregiver, whoever it is, will sit a child in their lap and either tell them a story or they will read them a book. And in that connection, back and forth, while the toddler is being able to speak, he's able or she is able to express emotion. They are able to express themselves. You're able to have a conversation. It's where laughter can occur. It's where deep teaching can take place because their hearts are wide open at that point, and the development stage begins right there. Now, why has the mental health of children declined? Well, because what's happening now is there is no one there to read them that story. The child has something that they're looking at, some sort of technology, and the parent's way too busy on theirs. And so there's no connection that's taking place. And so as a result of that, the importance of reading definitely has not been set or settled in at a toddler age. By the way, it's not the K through 12 problem. How come you're not teaching my kids to read? The issue is that the children have never been read to. And then it goes on to talk about, in this article, it's really interesting, that the ones who are actually teaching virtue that they find, and here it is, when it comes down to it, the natural order of things, and Bill Bennett spells it out. He said, mom and dad's behavior reinforces a belief in moral teaching. And therefore, since it does reinforce that belief in moral teaching, it gives credibility to teachers and coaches and youth group leaders and other relatives. And friends also, they can learn from friends of good character because of the example of, and this has to do with this sitting with your child and connecting. So we wonder today, how come we can't teach in the education system? What in the world has happened to kids over the last few years? What's going on? There's been no connection. Now, I know some of you are listening, and if you are connecting with your kids and you've sat with your toddlers and you've read to them and you've had those moments where you're actually doing those things, that's important. By the way, there needs to be a family time. There does. Having a time in your family where you actually sit down and you read the scriptures to your children, or you have them read them to you, is important. And by the way, that can continue even into the teenage beyond years. A time when the Bible is read in your home. It's an important thing. It does wonders for morality. But what's happening here? Why is this an issue? Well, as it comes down to it, anxiety is at an all-time high. Mental health, absolutely off the chain. I mean, it's terrible. As at the same time, education is at an all-time low. Nationwide. It's not that same exact way in multiple cultures, by the way. I do want you to understand that. It's not the same way in multiple cultures. The United States is actually behind on its education it's so many different areas. But the United States is really suffering. Its children are suffering from a lack of connection. So I teach and I work, and I've been working with middle and high schoolers for a long, long time. I work with adults too, but I've been working with middle and high schoolers for a long time. I still do. And at the beginning of this past year, I asked the question, because these that come, and I teach them once a week, these that come, I ask them, and I ask them each year, why do you come? This year was interesting. Why do you come? And the response was, because you're here. And I said, what? What does that mean? They said, because you sit, and there's a connection. And that's exactly what they were explaining. There's a connection here. See, where I teach students, by the way, where I teach students that are middle and high school, I don't use a screen. Now, there were screens in a room because at one point in time when I was working with millennials, we thought technology was going to be something that would aid. But I learned something quickly, that technology actually took away from the connection. So I stopped using the screens. And as I teach the scriptures, and I actually teach morality to kids, at this point, I stopped using the screens. They get enough screen time. So I set a precedent at one point, and I said, we're not going to use the screens anymore. We're not going to do that. We're just going to connect. And I sat down and I went back to an age-old thing that they still use in a lot of different countries. It's called oral tradition, where you actually speak, and you speak to them, and you allow them to ask questions. And boy, do they ask some deep ones. So when they said, we come because you're here, there's nowhere else we can go, because everywhere else we can go, they teach us a certain way. It was the conversation. But when we come, you really care about us. That's what the connection is. Do you know why a toddler develops healthily in his stage? Is because he learns real early, and oftentimes in that reading time where he can express, or she can express themselves, and you can express yourself back, that connection is crucial. And right there, they're able to learn morality. And what happens is that the person that they've connected with, boy, they'll take that teaching to the heart, and it's important. But they'll also, with mom and dad, with whatever's important to you, now that the connection's being made, whatever is important to you, they'll look at that and they'll say, I want whatever it is that's important. So guess what? If you have toddlers and that screen time is what you demonstrate to them, that's what will become important to them. And I'm watching that in record numbers. I encourage you to sit down and read with your toddler and make the connection. I encourage you to sit down and just tell the stories to your toddler. Tell things back and forth. Let them ask questions and connect. I encourage you, continue that on. And when they get up and reach second, third, fourth, fifth grade, all the way into high school, that the one person that they come to, or the people that they come to for connection, are trustworthy. And they'll come back. for that connection every time. It's interesting because at the same time, a question was asked of some of these students this past week. I wasn't there when this question was asked, but they'd said, what are some things that you're learning about that are coming out of Scripture? And they began to talk about the teachings of their heart, some of them quoting Scriptures. And when it was brought to my attention, I had no idea that they knew those things. And when they were asked, where are you learning those things? They said, we're learning those things with Scott on Wednesdays. Wow. Folks, let me say something to you. As a result of the fact that connection has actually been missing, academically, our children have gone downhill. As a result of that, morality has taken a back seat. And though technology, our kids are just fluent in technology. Things that truly matter, really matter, that are going to matter in the days ahead for the future. The things that are important, that matter, they'll be missing from their lives because no connection was made if we don't get in and connect now. It's interesting. I look at the book of Philippians chapter 4. And as I look at Philippians chapter 4, there's some key things at the end of the book. And when it comes down to it, I can go to 4:6 and it says, be anxious for nothing. And it talks about anxiety. He's trying to tell you how to sort of reduce the anxiety and how to deal with that when it does come. And he says, in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. It's interesting today because what happens today is I hear a lot of complaining. Tons of it, actually. And I hear a ton of complaining from people all over the place. What a mess. I read another article about people trying to travel on Easter weekend and the fury that was between people because of the complaining and the things, the negativity, all of that was going on, and the anxiousness that people are at a boiling point today. Because some of this is missing that we're talking about, and I'm going to get down to the final parts of it here in a minute. And it says, when you do get anxious, take everything by prayer and supplication to the Lord with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Did you know 11 million people who were not raised in Christianity at all? 11 million people have come to know Jesus over the last few years. 11 million people who were never raised in Christianity in the United States of America have come to know Christ. So, for those of you that don't think the gospel is not spreading, it truly is. And sometimes the gospel has spread because some of these students and some of these kids and even adults who are facing this anxiety that they cannot get beyond them, they find Christ. And when they do, once they find Christ, they're able to let go of much of that anxiety. But when it comes down to it, it finally comes down to this, which is verse 8. And it says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good rapport, if there is any virtue, if there is anything praiseworthy. And then there's a word that follows that. It says meditate on these things. Listen to me. Meditate doesn't mean you clear your mind and open your mind up and just pour out everything. Meditate means you set your mind on these things and you think about that. You literally put that at the forefront of your mind and you meditate on that. You spend that time. Do you realize today there's not a lot of time to quote unquote meditate? Because our meditation time oftentimes is being taken by the technology that we hold in our hand. And you've heard me before talk about technology, but today these articles are back to back that I'm telling you. We didn't know. We had no idea. When the iPhone was coming out, we had no idea that it wouldn't be, it would do the things that it's done or bring the things that it's done in our lives or our children's lives. We didn't know till basically it was too late. I didn't know till one of my children basically came to me and said, please, Dad, please take it away from me, because it had absolutely consumed their life. So I did, and life came back to them. It was an amazing thing. But I had no idea. I'm too busy thinking Atari from the 1980s. We're far beyond that. If you're listening to me today, I beg of you, limit that time. Limit that time that your kids are gaming. Limit that time you're gaming. Limit the time that you're spent on that screen. Make sure that you have some time for meditation, obviously, to sit down and think about the things that are pure and noble and just. I encourage you to read to your toddlers. I encourage you to have a time that you talk about the scriptures in your home, or you tell the story about biblical heroes and the morality that goes not only with those stories, but you get down to the teachings of Jesus Christ, where your kids can ask those questions, and I promise you will change their life. I promise you that if you connect with your children and you sit down and you read to your toddlers and you begin to open up that door, it'll make them better students. It will make them better children. It will definitely make them better adults. And in their lives, mentally, there'll be less anxiety. Now, that anxiety is going to come in moments, but there'll be less of it. And they'll know where to take it when it does come. And they'll know who to trust. And they'll know who to follow. And it will make them truly wonderful adults, because they'll follow a wonderful set of guidelines that you've laid down just from connection. And hopefully they'll follow the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And in doing so, it'll be amazing what they accomplish in the days that are ahead. So what's on my heart today? But in my pending pile, it's important. And I know some of you are going to hear, wow, there are toddlers at stake and there are children at stake. But I promise you, it's far greater than that. It's not just toddlers and children that are at stake, because they grow to become adults and leaders. That's at stake. So what are you telling me, Scott? That I just sit down and read with my children? I'm telling you, connect. Yes, have that time. Dads and moms, sit with your children. Read those books. Encourage them to read. Encourage them to meditate. Encourage them to talk. Tell the stories. Laugh. Get heartfelt. And grow together. It will be life-changing on every single level. If you're a grandparent, encourage it. Get in. Get into your grandchildren's lives. Make a difference. And it'll not only change your family, but it'll change those around you as well. What's all this mean? Well, you're listening to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. What it means is that, first of all, in order to be a person of the morality of Christian morality, it would be great to know Jesus. Because when you do know Jesus, the ability to love is increased so much. The ability to love on a scale that is incredible is given. It's amazing. But the ability to have that compassion and understanding and the ability to live by that morality and those principles is far greater when you follow Jesus. You can do so by stopping right where you are and just saying, Lord, there is something that has kept me from you. It's been my sins. Please forgive me of my sins. I want you in my life more than anything. Come into my life, save me, and guide me, and lead me from this day forward. And I promise you, he will do it if you are heartfelt and you want Jesus in your life. Secondly, if you're listening to this podcast and things have been out of order, the only way that changes is if you do. If you actually make that change, if you actually put that screen down, if you actually make that time to read with those children. If you actually do that, you have to purpose to do that because it's a fight. It is. It's a fight. Just like it's a fight to know Jesus every day and to stay in the Word. It's a fight to know Jesus. It's a fight to know each other. It's a fight to know each other. Everything else in the world is fighting for that attention. And to put that down, it's a fight. I encourage you. Lay some things down. Because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, are those headlines really going to matter? No. Are those things that you're looking at, are those TikTok videos actually going to make a difference? No. I promise you, what will make a difference is the fact that you've gotten involved in each other's lives. And in the relationships that are around you, they'll make a difference in your everyday life. You have to purpose to do that. I thank you for listening today. And I hope some of the things that have been said today really strike your heart. And I hope they help in the days that are ahead in all of your relationships, especially for those of you that have toddlers anywhere in your life. Look forward to talking to you again Monday. Have a great week.